In the past few weeks, the UFC has announced some huge fights at Bantamweight, which has made the title picture a little bit messy. Most notably, we have Aljamain Sterling taking on Sean O'Malley at UFC 292 in Boston in what is likely his last ever title defense. He's going to be moving up to 145 to contend for the featherweight belt. Not only is he going up to contend though, he's also giving his good friend and training partner Merab Dvalishvili a chance at the 135-pound strap. But two potential number one contender fights have been booked. We have Corey Sandhagen taking on the undefeated Umar Nurmagomedov, who nobody wants to face. And surprisingly, we have Henry Cejudo taking on Chito Vera at the same fight card at UFC 292 as Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling. Now I say surprising because I thought we were going to see Merab and Henry in a surefire title eliminator, but with all these new fights booked, there is no telling who's next in line for a title shot. What we do know, however, is that there are plenty of ways in which this can play out, and that is exactly what this video is about. Today we are breaking down the bantamweight title picture and how it is going to play out in all scenarios. Scenario 1, Sean vs. Chito. So it seems pretty clear that the ideal scenario for the UFC would be to have Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera fight for the title. And if Chito Vera beats Henry Cejudo at UFC 292, I think that's exactly the fight we're going to get. It doesn't matter if Corey beats Umar, and it doesn't even matter if Aljo starts Sean. The pay-per-view potential for that highly coveted rematch is far too lucrative for the UFC to pass up. As we all know, Chito Vera delivered Sean his first ever defeat back at UFC 252, where a leg kick shut off his perennial nerve. Fans have been wanting this rematch, and the two have been taking shots at each other in the media and online ever since. The most conventional way for this fight to happen would be to have Sean win alongside Chito at UFC 292, but even if he loses, Aljo's going to move up to 145, which means he's going to vacate the belt, and that's going to give the UFC every reason they need to put Sean back in a title fight with Chito Vera. Because remember, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. And at the end of the day, this is all about business and not necessarily who deserves what. Now, where does that leave our losers? What I believe will happen is that the winner of Corey vs. Umar will take on Merab in a fight that determines who will face the winner of Sean vs. Chito. I'm not sure what Cejudo will be thinking if he loses to Chito, but I'm sure retirement is on the table, so I'm not too confident that he will ever fight again if he loses to Chito at UFC 292. But if he does fight, I assume it will be versus Petr Yan or Rob Font for a chance for all of them to get back in the title picture. Get used to hearing Yan and Font because they are going to play similar roles in all of these scenarios. Scenario 2, Sean vs. Merab. Moving on to Scenario 2, we assume that Sean beats Aljo and Henry beats Chito, and Sean's first title defense will be against Merab Dvalishvili. I think that no matter how Corey vs. Umar plays out, we're going to see Sean vs. Merab for the title if the aforementioned fights go as planned. Aside from a Chito Vera win, Merab is not to be denied of his title shot. Currently riding a 9-fight win streak, beating the likes of Jose Aldo and Petr Yan, there is no doubt that he will be next in line for the title. The storyline would also be intriguing, as we'd have the former champion's best friend stepping in to avenge his loss against superstar Sean O'Malley. And let me reiterate, if it makes dollars, it makes sense, and this is probably the second most ideal scenario for the UFC. The rest of these scenarios do not have the same promotion potential that the two aforementioned bouts possess. Even if Corey goes out there and manhandles Umar, his 3-fight win streak does not compare to the previously mentioned streak of Merab. So if he wants a shot at UFC gold, he's going to have things play out a little bit differently. With that being said, the winner of Corey vs. Umar would take on Henry in a title eliminator, whilst Chito would fight either Petr Yan or Rob Font to get back into the title picture. Scenario 3, Merab vs. Corey. Speak of the devil, our third scenario has Corey taking on Merab for the vacant belt. This is assuming that Aljo beats Sean and moves up to 145, Corey beats Umar, and Henry beats Chito. These two would both come in riding impressive win streaks, and in this scenario, this seems to make the most sense. I believe that Merab and Corey both have a better case than Henry, as Henry would be 1-1 in his last two and would need another fight to secure a shot at the title. And a perfect fight for Henry to secure a title shot would be beating Sean O'Malley, and I think the UFC would make this fight. It would be a title eliminator between arguably the two biggest names at bantamweight and would serve as a perfect co-main event in any pay-per-view. They've had their beef in the past, they've taken shots at each other in person and online, and considering their hypothetical scenarios in this case, this fight would make perfect sense. This would leave Umar and Chito to possibly fight each other, or we could have one of them take on Rob Font while the other takes on Petr Yan. And if this is how it goes down, I would assume we'd have Chito vs. Yan, as this would be a banger of a fight night headliner. Meanwhile, we'd have Umar vs. Font, which would most likely take place at the UFC Apex. Scenario 4, Merab vs. Henry. This brings us to our final scenario in which Henry takes on Merab for the vacant belt. This scenario assumes that Aljo beats Sean, Henry beats Chito, and Umar beats Corey. This fight makes sense because Merab and Cejudo stylistically match up very well, and these two have had history. They were chirping each other leading up to the UFC 288 showdown between Henry and Aljo, and Henry has called out Merab on Twitter. They are both big names in the division, and I feel that the UFC would prefer this fight to an Umar vs. Merab fight due to the name value and, through no fault of his own, Umar's lack of big name wins. With that being said, a big name for him to fight would be Sean O'Malley, and a fight of this magnitude would be a huge statement for both of these guys to get back into the title picture. This would likely be a title eliminator to see who will face the winner of Merab vs. Henry. This leaves Corey and Cheeto coming off of losses, and either one of these guys versus Piotr Jan would be fireworks. We've already seen a war between Corey and Jan, which was an incredible fight, but we've also seen Font versus Cheeto, and I'm not sure how the UFC would feel about booking two rematches. Either way, those four are all in the mix, and a fight could happen between any combination of them. Those were what I believe to be all of the possible ways this bantamweight title picture can unfold. Please feel free to leave a comment below about how you think all of these situations will play out, and please be sure to subscribe and follow us on all of our social medias linked in the description below. Thank you all, and I'll see you all next time.